Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're actually in the sculpture studio. We've decided to do this because you're going to be working in here so much. I want to introduce you to the tools that you're going to be using to cut and shape the metal that you're going to be using in your welding project. Now the primary metal, or the metal that you're going to be using, and let me just adjust my focus, is this. It's 1/4 inch rod. So what it is essentially steel that's round, or like a column, okay? It's 1/4 inch across, and it's mild steel. It's pretty soft stuff. This is the stuff that we're going to be using. Now, to cut it, we're going to be using this fine tool. This is actually called a hacksaw, and I'm going to tell you just a few things about the hacksaw in a moment when we get to that point, but I also want to show you a couple of other tools that we're going to be using. We're going to be using the vise grip. We're going to be using the bar clamps, which you've already become somewhat accustomed to. And we're also going to learn a little bit about the flat file, the flat bastard file, and this round file, or sometimes called a rat tail file. So these are the tools we're going to use. Let's just quickly start with the hacksaw. And the first thing I want to show you is the blade on the hacksaw. All right, hopefully you get a little bit of you get a good view of the teeth there. The teeth on a hacksaw are of course tiny. They're tiny and they're really hard. They've been hardened in such a way that they can cut through soft steel and other metals. Okay, this is the tool of choice, at least when you're doing work with your hands, for cutting a piece of metal. Like the soft carbon steel that we're using here. Now, the other thing I want to say is, if you'll notice, the front of my saw is here, the handle is back here, okay? And you'll notice that the teeth all point that way. So in other words, that means the cut is a push cut. If you notice the teeth are pointing back that way, you'll take it out of the saw, turn it around, and you'll be cutting in the proper direction. This saw is not designed for a pull cut. All you have to do, by the way, is loosen this little wing nut down here, and then the blade will pull off these two little pieces. Once it's loose, you flip it and you put it back on those two little pieces and tighten it back up. And you just get it really nice and tight. And you can see, once it's tight, it bows this little arc here a little bit, and makes it even easier to get a good tension. All right. Next thing we want to do, and I'm going to ask Sanford to move the camera up so you guys can see the work that we have here. Yeah, go for it. So we're going to move it a little closer to me and then tilt it down so that we can see the surface. Great. Once Sanford has that all lined up, and if you could put that screen back over so I can also see, there we go. I'm going to tilt it just a little bit more. Come on. There we go. Doesn't like that, does it? Okay, great. So you can see the surface I'm working on now. We're going to go back to the bar clamps, and we're going to use the bar clamps to hold what I have here, which is a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. We'll provide you with a little piece of that plywood. I'm sure you remember the bar clamps very well by now. I'm not going to go over all the details like the little ridges on the back or the release, but I will remind you that you need to sort of like take this threaded rod and loosen it all the way up. And I'm just going to drop it in here so that I have my bar, or I have my plywood, firmly mounted to the table, okay? Now, to cut the steel, it's a similar principle to what we were doing with the wood, but we need a different kind of tool to hold it to the wood that we're using, to the surface that we're using here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that steel down like that, and I'm going to use this tool, which is the vise clamp or vise grip, to clamp it on there. Now this tool has a couple of different places to adjust. If you close it, it locks closed. You can use this little knob to loosen and tighten these teeth. What you want to do is get it to the point where it's, going to accommodate both the piece of wood and the little rod of steel, okay? But a little bit tighter than will accommodate those two things, so that when I put it on, by the way, this has like a rounded set of teeth, so it can actually grip something that has a curve to its surface, all right? So when I come over here and I lock it down, boom, did you hear it click into place? It locks itself into place and it makes it so I can just barely move that piece of steel. Now what I can do now is set myself up once I've determined how long I want that piece of steel to be, and I can begin my cut. Now, I didn't make a mark. There's actually a Sharpie right over there, Sanford, if you would hand it to me. I'm just gonna make a mark that's arbitrary, but that will give us a little idea of where we wanna cut, all right? That's a funny pen, okay? So I'm gonna try to make my cut somewhere on that mark. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull back a little bit just to try and sort of put a groove in that metal. And you can see I've already got one, a little tiny groove there. Now I can use the push to really start my cutting. And all of the cutting is gonna happen on the push. It doesn't mean you can't pull back, but I'm just gonna push. Whoop, and I'm moving a little bit. I have to slow down just a little. Push. And in a very short period of time, I've gone ahead and I've cut that little piece of steel that I needed for my project. It's really that simple. Now you'll notice, maybe, we'll see if you can see it, that that's got sort of an irregular edge. If I want to clean that up, I can use the files to do that job. I'm also going to ask you to use the files to do some cleanup on the welds that you make, but we'll cover that shortly, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this file up, and I'm going to put one set of fingers on this end to kind of control the tip so it's not out of control, a good firm grip on this side, and I'm just going to move away from myself. And maybe in just a moment I'll have Sanford take the camera off and focus it on there so that what you can see is how I'm leaving a mark. You'll see that this is actually designed to cut that metal. So we're gonna shake you up for a second. Sanford's gonna hand hold this and bring it over so that you can see the cut that happens when we do this, okay? So here we go, we're gonna see how it works. There's what we have. I'm actually gonna loosen it. I'm gonna turn it over so we have a good flat edge. Can you see it okay, Sanford? Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna push this way, like that, and that's gonna sort of like take the edge off. It's gonna soften it. So here we go. See how I softened it in one pass? Whoop. Soften, 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 soften. Now a bastard file is not meant to just cut in one direction. You can cut this way, and you can cut coming back. But I recommend just getting used to going one direction like that. And you can see I'm just putting a little bevel on that steel. That's really useful, okay? That cleans it up, that softens it. And if I were sort of attaching another piece of steel to this steel, that gives me a nice little sort of pocket for that weld together. Now let me also just quickly show you the round file. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a few cuts right there, just right on this surface. We're gonna use it in a different way when it comes to welding, but I just wanna let you see how it works. So what I'm gonna do, same thing. With just a little work, I'm starting to cut a little groove in this. It's a slow cut, but I'm starting to make a good cut in the groove, in the little piece of metal that I'm working. And I could maybe even, if I cut it deep enough, lay another piece right inside of it and then make my weld there. So just a quick tutorial about how to cut the material and then how to treat the ends, how to clean it up when it needs to be cleaned up, using the flat file, using the rat tail file, and then all of these other clamps and hacksaw to get the job done. Excellent. We'll see you in the next video.
Yeah.